Hello, I'm Dr. Tyler Dare from Penn State. I'm in the Structural Acoustics Department at the Applied Research Lab. I'm actually fairly new to the field of machine learning. I have historically done a lot of acoustics and vibrations experimental work. And over the past year or so, I've gotten more and more interested in machine learning. But there are some things that I sort of wish I had known going in. So in anticipation of the panel discussion on machine learning, I thought I would cover quickly four things that I've learned as a machine learning novice. So I'm definitely not on the cutting edge of machine learning, but these are some things that I've learned over the past year that maybe I wish I had known going in. So first of all, machine learning is a very broad term, and a lot of folks use machine learning and artificial intelligence and neural networks kind of interchangeably. But here's just a thing from Steve Brunton and Nathan Kutz from University of Washington. And they're breaking down machine learning into a lot of different things, and neural networks is actually only a small subset of that. So you can see over here there's a classification. Classification machine learning, neural networks are a subset of that under the supervised machine learning. But also things that maybe when novices like me throw around the term machine learning, they probably aren't thinking of like linear regression. So sticking a best fit line through a bunch of data, scatter plot, is a kind of supervised machine learning. That's probably not what people are talking about when they say, oh, I do machine learning in acoustics. And then all the way on the other side is something like k-means clustering or proper orthogonal decomposition, unsupervised things. So there's a lot of overlap between machine learning and statistics and just sort of general data analysis techniques. A lot of times people say machine learning when they should be saying neural networks, artificial neural networks. Also, the term artificial intelligence is so general and so broad that it's not particularly helpful. It doesn't really forward the discussion much, in my opinion. If what you mean is neural networks, then we should say neural networks. Having a machine that is good at doing a particular task doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the machine is intelligent or not. So that's just one thing I've come across. The other thing, this is coming from a more experimental perspective, that I've learned is using neural networks with experimental data doesn't require experimental training data. So we're used to thinking of big, maybe classification neural networks that you throw in a whole bunch of training data. Google uses armies of people and kind of tricks their website users into solving these, like, is this a stop sign? Is this a bus sort of things? That's using a whole lot of people, which in this case would be like experts, generating the training data for a neural network. And so, me coming from the experimental acoustics side, I used to think, well, I'm never going to have enough graduate students to generate, enough data to make a good training set. But that's not always true. You don't have to have experimental training data, even if you intend to use the neural network with experimental data. So let me give you an example. In this, I've got a paper in the Internoise conference from 2020, if you're interested in more information about this. But we took a aluminum plate and put some accelerometers on it and excited the plate. And the idea was, can the neural network figure out where you hit the plate with an instrumented hammer? So given the frequency response functions, can we extract the information about where the impact was? So, hitting this plate hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of times is totally impractical. So instead of generating training data experimentally, used a model to generate the training data, a finite element model of this plate, but lots and lots of very similar finite element models. And the idea was hopefully the variation in the plate parameters, say the modal frequencies and loss factors, are enough such that the actual experimental setup lies somewhere within the spread of the simulated training data. And it ended up working pretty well. Like I said, there's details in this InterNoise 2020 paper. But this kind of marionette-looking picture here is the bottom layer is where the actual impacts were, and the top layer is where the neural network predicted them to be. And this is with 100% simulated training data, but actual experimental validation data. And you can see most of those are kind of straight up and down, so it worked fairly well. Maybe a little bit more bigger picture stuff that I've learned about machine learning. It's not a substitute for subject matter expertise. There's a lot of choices that go into defining what these networks look like. So, for example, on the previous example with the plate, we're used to looking at acoustic data as maybe a logarithmic frequency axis and a logarithmic amplitude or decibel amplitude. But the network, it's not going to make those decisions for you. You have to say, okay, maybe this makes more sense to look at in terms of a real and imaginary. Maybe I need a different number of sensors. Maybe I pre-process the data in a way that is going to make more sense to the network. So in this case, way too many frequency bins to be of use in the neural network. So we had to downsample in frequency in an intelligent way to kind of retain all the information from the peaks you see there. So that process of pre-processing the data, getting it in a form that's going to be useful to the neural network is something that takes a fair amount of subject matter expertise. So the neural network is not going to do the science for you. It can just develop kind of efficient algorithms for things, but what you do on the front end, on the back end is even more important. So this last thing is maybe a little bit of a soapbox. Machine learning is not going to fix your data operations problems. So let me give you a more concrete example. So it's actually fairly easy to design a neural network that would do something like take in a signal and output whether or not the signal, maybe you're looking for a bad channel from a couple hundred sensors or something like that. So you want to know if this microphone is clipping or has a 60 cycle noise or something like that. It's actually easy to design a neural network that will do that. But that's not really the problem. It's much harder to get that information in front of the person who needs to see it at the time they need to see it. So ideally what you will want is someone goes to make a plot or something, and I want to compare this signal, or I want to play this sound for the client, and the system tells them that, oh, that has some noise in it, you might not want to do that. Well, the neural network part of that is easy. What's hard is all the stuff that goes into it. So the machine learning is really just an ingredient in this whole maybe big data paradigm. So the visualization is important. Data operations here, that's stuff like databasing. So once I have learned this information that this particular signal has some 60 cycle noise in it, what do I do with that? Does that live in a spreadsheet? Does that just print out a 1 or a 0 about whether or not it has 60 cycle noise? Or preferably, is that something that gets popped up when an analyst goes and tries to do some other processing with that data? So that requires that information, that knowledge lives in some accessible form. And this is all kind of gets related to a data infrastructure problem, where if you have gigabytes and terabytes of data, where does that live? What hardware is needed to access it quickly? So machine learning is an interesting area of research, but it's not going to solve all these other problems. It's not going to get you more server space. It's not even going to pop up the little red light that says don't use that channel. So that's all for me. Just some things to think about, things I've learned over the last year or so as I've gotten more and more into machine learning. I look forward to seeing everyone at the panel discussion.